Good to see you this morning, and look forward to catching up with everyone afterwards. I thought we might talk about resilience today. How many people here are resilient? Okay, very good. How many? No, I won't ask who is not resilient. The dictionary, Oxford Dictionary, says of resilience, able to recoil or spring back into shape after bending or being compressed. Do you remember those days way back? I actually tried the $2 shop, and I tried Safeways, tried the news agents. You know, they had a clown, and the base of a clown was an area where they put sand in there or water, and the face of a clown. And when you were kids, you could punch the clown, and the clown would go over and come back, and you punch again, and that would happen again. It would continue happening. It didn't matter how much you punched that clown, it would still keep popping up again. And on the front of your outline of the message today, you'll see a picture of something similar to that, a punching bag. Anyone feel like a punching bag? Okay. Who would like to be resilient? I think most of us would like to be. Anyone doesn't want to be resilient? A person who is resilient is able to withstand or recover quickly from difficult positions. There's a story that goes, and I don't know how true it is, but I'll tell it just for the sake of telling. The Europeans were testing aircraft engines against bird strikes a while ago. And using a cannon which launched the deceased bird, obviously, at the aeroplane, they were testing it out, and were able to do it quite successfully, apparently. Eventually, I won't mention the nation, but the well-known nation that we all know needed to test their engines the same way. And so they brought a device over from Europe and started testing. But it didn't matter how often and whatever they did, their engines seemed to always fail when birds were shot into them. After months of testing, they decided that they'd better send for a European expert to come over and show them what the problem was. He watched one test, and then he asked them, "Have you tried thawing your chickens out first?" I want to suggest to you this morning that whilst we're trying to be resilient, there's a basic issue which we're not being conscious of, not being aware of. There's something that we overlook in our attempts to be efficient, to be coping with life, to be resilient. Now, it's not so easy, is it, being resilient? Covet, I think most of us have either had it or someone in our family has had COVID over the last few years. Before that was the bushfires all through South Australia, all through New South Wales and through Victoria. We've had the Ukraine war. Price of petrol's gone up and made life difficult. Cost of electricity, they reckon it's going to go up 25-50% in the next 12 months. The road collapse at Warburton. Brigitte went up there the other day, and there was no sign of anything at the time, and she went over and just whoop down one side of the car, and she then came home and she said, "I think that road's going to collapse." And the next year here, that they've put signs up and lights and all sorts of things. You can only go on one side of the road. And family issues, and we've got 9 people in our family. We need to be resilient. Grandchildren and children. Life is so difficult at times, isn't there? There are times when, I don't know about you, but we've struggled. There are times when there have been tears. There's times when some of us have been angry, frustrated. How about you and your family? How do you cope? One of the most helpful things, I think, for us, particularly during COVID, was all our extended family, our girls, every Sunday afternoon we would get on the internet. We learned how to do that and get on the internet and be able to all talk to each other and see each other at the same time. It's incredible. That was one of the big pluses, wasn't it, of going through that period of time. But just getting together every Sunday afternoon, talking, and we ended up playing trivia and seeing how we went with that, and so it was entertaining as well. But it's just a way of hanging on to each other and hanging in there. Now we have, on a Sunday night, just our immediate 9 within the family get together on a Sunday night, and we have tea together, and then we have a few minutes of family worship where we do a reading and ask some questions and talk together. Just a way of helping us to all hang together there. The story which Elizabeth read to us today was a story of resilience of Caleb. Moses and the people of Egypt, the people of Israel, had come out of Egypt. They'd been slaves, and they sought their freedom and ultimately got it. And they're out in the desert, met God at Mount Sinai, and they were promised the land of Canaan. And so they travelled through the desert, and after 12 months in the desert, they landed near Palestine, near Canaan. They decided they'd check out the land, which was a wise thing to do. So they sent 10 spies out to search out the land. And they came back after a while, and they carried with them huge bunches of grapes and all sorts of good things. That it's a land flowing with milk and honey, they said. But then they reported that there were powerful people there. There were forts and there were giants. The land was well populated. But Joshua and Caleb reported, we must go in. We can do it. We were able to do it. We can take this land. We can take these people. But the other 8 said, they're too strong. They're too big. The country will totally devour us. We were like grasshoppers to them. And we felt like grasshoppers to them. And of course, imagine being 12 months in the desert, being slaves beforehand, and this was the promised land where they were going to go, and to hear these reports. And so the people cried out, and they yelled and said, what are you doing to us? They wailed, the passage says. They grumbled against Moses, who was their leader. We're better to have stayed in Egypt than go out and die in the desert. Let's appoint a new leader and go back to Egypt. Joshua and Caleb were so frustrated, and they said, it's a good land. It's a land full of beautiful food, and we can do this. God will lead us and give it to us. Don't rebel. Don't be afraid. And the people nearly came to stoning them. They were so angry. God, the passage says, God was angry with them too and wanted to give up on them as a people. And Moses said, no, God, hang in there, we'll change, we'll do what you want. 45 years later, they didn't make it to the promised land at that time. And in fact, God said, only 2 of you will survive, Joshua and Caleb, the 2 who had gone in and brought the good report. Even Moses himself, their leader, didn't make it. 45 years later, and under Joshua's leadership, they'd come back to the River Jordan, and they crossed over. They'd taken the city of Jericho, and they were taking the promised land. Caleb stood up. There were a number of years into the battle. They'd been fighting for the country, and they hadn't taken it all. And Caleb said, "The Lord has kept me alive. I'm still strong." This is after 45 years, 85 years of age. "It's time to give me my land that God has promised me. If God is with me, I will drive the enemy out." And Joshua gave him Hebron as his inheritance. And he went in and he took the land. What's the opposite of resilience? The people said, "We went into the land to which he sent us. It does indeed flow with milk and honey. This is its produce," and I waved around what the produce was. "At the same time, its inhabitants are powerful people. The towns are fortified and very big. And yes, and we saw the descendants of Anak there, and they were sort of a giants, sons of the gods type of people." It's a story not only of resilience, but it's a story of people who were not resilient. "We cannot march against these people," they said. "They are stronger." And they began to knock the country and say, "It will devour us. Every man is a giant." The whole community raised their voices and cried out aloud. The people wailed all night, it says, and they grumbled against Moses and wished we had died in Egypt. "We should go back to Egypt," they said. "Let's appoint another leader and go back to Egypt." I was reading that and I couldn't think, doesn't that sound like our newspapers and the reactions of people as we've gone through Covet? You imagine these people that come out of Egypt. They had to make bricks. They were slaves. And they were told they weren't to have straw. They had to go and collect their own straw. So they had to go and collect their own straw. They were flogged. They were not given time to worship God. They hated by the Egyptians. Their first sons, well, their sons were drowned in the River Nile. And they wanted to go back to that. It's a picture of people who are non-resilient, crushed as slaves, and yet when they face opposition and difficulties in a new system, even though they were free, found it hard to cope. Caleb's qualities of resistance stand out to me. Instead of saying, "I can't," he said, "I can do it." We must march in. We're well able to do it. Do not be afraid. And then 45 years later, still saying, "I'm still strong. I'm still alive. I'm on a promise. It's time for this to happen. I will drive them out." A picture of resilience. Never, "No, I can't do it, but I can do it." 45 years of believing God and still ready to reclaim the land that God had promised them. Resilient people are people who are unstoppable, flexible, strong, tough, hardy, irrepressible. He did have his moments, Caleb. He got pretty angry with the people when they didn't want to comply and do what God wanted them to do. Some things that resilient people do, they acknowledge their emotions. They acknowledge the things that are happening in their own lives. They act positively. They refocus their life at that point of time. They adjust the way they think. They ask themselves, what can I learn from this situation? And they start to do something that is positive. God spoke to Moses after this incident. And God said of Caleb this, but my servant Caleb is of another spirit, because he has obeyed me perfectly. I'll bring him into the land he has entered, and his race will possess it forever. A different spirit. He follows me wholeheartedly. I would like to suggest to you that ultimate resilience comes to a person through opening their life to God completely, like Caleb did. In the last message, I spoke on the upper room. The disciples were up in the upper room, the 12 of them, and wondering what was going to happen. Jesus had left them, and they were left to their own devices. While they were there and praying, God's Spirit descended on them and entered into them. And all of a sudden they were changed, and they were able to speak the languages of the 120 different nationalities that were in Jerusalem at that time. They lost their fear. They were revitalized. Instead of fear, complaints and grizzles like the Israelites in Caleb's day, they were fearless. They were bold. They no longer felt like fugitives in their own country. They talked openly about Jesus. There was a different spirit in them. There was a wholehearted commitment to Jesus. See, I think that resilience is a total commitment of your life to God, and resilience comes as a result of that. The secret to resilience is found in Jesus, God's Son. The Oxford Dictionary, which I gave you before, able to recoil or spring back into shape after bending or becoming compressed, or alternatively, able to withstand or recover quickly from difficult positions. Paul wrote about Jesus in 1 Corinthians 15. He said this, Christ died for our sins, that he was buried and he was raised to life on the third day. And he appeared to Peter and secondly to the 12. Now it seems to me that's resilience. Jesus was killed on the cross, dead, entombed. 3 days later, he came alive again. That's resilience, isn't it? And that's the kind of resilience that we can draw on as we give our lives over to God. Psychologists and theorists can say, oh, you should do something positive. They can work on our mindsets and, we need to think in a different way. And they can help, but they're not the answer. The answer lies in God and in Jesus. Put this here for a reason. This is a diagram taken from a little booklet which is called The Four Spiritual Laws. I don't know whether you've ever seen it, but it's a little booklet that I use when I want to take people through the point of making a commitment of their lives to Jesus. And it starts off saying the self-directed life. This is your life. This is the throne of your life. This is where the decision making is made in your life. And the S stands for self. So that's you and me. J stands for Jesus. Now in this diagram you can see that Jesus is over here, outside of the person's life. The S, self, is on the throne room. We're in control of what we're doing in our lives. All these little dots around here are the things in your life, like your family situation, your work situation, the way you're feeling, the way you're thinking, and so on. And it's all over the place. Life's in a mess. Darryl yesterday shared his story of, which pretty much pictured this very much. He grew up in a family which was separated. His dad had a little bit of involvement in his life, but not very much, and when he did, it wasn't very positive or helpful. He ended up as a teenager going into crime, doing all sorts of stuff, into drugs, ended up in prison, and so his life was in a total mess. He was trying to work his issues through, but finding it pretty hopeless in trying to do that. And it's a story of my life as a teenager, a young boy, leaving Yarra Junction and going to Melbourne. My life was pretty much in that similar situation. You see, the problem is this. We're wanting to control our own lives. We're wanting to do our own thing. And Jesus is not part of our lives. Now, if I can get this to switch over. Whoops, there we go. This is the God-directed life. You see, there's been a change. Jesus is on the throne room of your life. Self is sitting in front of the chair and saying, Jesus, I want you to direct me. I want you to lead me in my life. Self is focused on Jesus. Jesus is on the throne. Your interests, your family, your relationships are in order and working well. One of the interesting things about Darren's story yesterday was saying that all those sorts of things were starting to come together for him. He's only been a Christian for a few months, but they were starting to come together. On the previous, I won't turn it over again, on the previous one, your resilience is shot, gone. You've got no resilience. In this one, with Jesus in the control point of your life, you look up to him and say, Jesus, what can I do? You show me. You direct me. I read an illustration of a little boy out in a ship, and there's a storm belting the ship all over the place. And people were scared and people were afraid. And one of the passengers saw this little boy and said, "Why aren't you afraid?" And the little boy looked up and said, "See, the man behind the helm, he's the captain. He's my dad." And that's how it is when we give our lives to Jesus. We can look up and we say, he's in control. He knows best. I'll follow his lead. I don't have to worry. I mean, life's hard, life's difficult, life's got problems, the issues are there for me, but Jesus is in control. The chapter 4 of the book of Revelation, the people, the Christians in that day were under pressure from all sorts of things. Some of them being put in prison, some were being killed for following Jesus. And John, the writer of Revelation, in chapter 4 says, look up and see God on his throne. Look up and see that God is ultimately in control. It doesn't matter what happens to us around here. God is in control and he'll work it out for me, for you. You don't have to worry. You don't have to be concerned. Just trust me. Just look at me. Remember the storm, another storm, the Sea of Galilee. And the disciples were travelling in the storm and Jesus wasn't with them. And they were afraid. They'd been belted around, they thought they were going to sink. And then they saw this figure coming towards them, and it was Jesus. And Peter, being the boldest of them, said, Jesus, can I walk in the water towards you? Of course, total storm. But Jesus, yes, come to me. And so he stepped out of the boat and started walking. But then the storm started impeding on his life, and he stood looking around and he started to sink. And he said, Jesus, help me. He reached out and Jesus took him by the hand and brought him into the boat. You see, resilience comes not through our own efforts. Resilience comes through having our focus on God, on Jesus. You and I do that. Then all the stuff around us that happens, the things that worry us, concern us, the things that keep us awake at night, our kids, our families, our work situation, whatever it is, keep the focus on Jesus. And you do that simply just each day, committing your life to him again and saying, Jesus, be with me today. Praying to him, talking to him, saying, what do you want me to do? Can you work this out? Resilience is not relying on our own resources, but relying on God. I don't know whether you need to, but I think I do. Refocus today. Put my life totally in his hands, in his direction. Can we pray for a moment? You might want to just in your own life, just in your own heart, talk to Jesus now and say, Jesus, will you guide me? Will you direct me? Jesus, so often in my own life, I've messed up. And I haven't kept my eyes focused to you. I've hopped up onto that chair and said, I can do this, I can control my life. But I've messed up. Thank you for being willing to put up with me. In fact, thank you for loving me and caring about who I am and what I am. And I just want to follow you. I just want you to show me how to deal with the things in my life that are of worry and concern for the people who I care most about. Whatever life throws at me, I want to trust you. I want to follow you. Because I know that's where